My name is Yan. I'm the recruiter for early career researchers here at Broad. And like Amma mentioned, I will be leading a resume and interview workshop today. So I'm going to just start with sharing my screen. Okay, can everybody see that? Great. So I will get started. Um, As I mentioned, we are the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard. That's actually our main building at 415 Main Street in Cambridge, Massachusetts, right there. We are in the heart of Kendall Square in Cambridge. And this is for the early career researcher population, the community. And here we have our campus recruiting or early career researcher mission statement: building a bridge for the next generation of ambitious and inventive talent who will impact biomedicine. And we hope that's you guys. All right, so what is the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard? I'm going to give a quick review of our recruiting program before we kind of jump into the workshop. But we are a biomedical research nonprofit organization. We are the result of a collaboration between MIT and Harvard. As you can see here, we are composed of faculty, students, postdoc, scientific staff, as well as administrators like myself. So there is a way to get involved with Broad, even if you don't have particularly a life science background. And we do partner with, you know, industry organizations, as well as the 5 teaching hospitals in the Boston, Cambridge area. You can see some of their logos up here: MGH, Brigham Women, etc. But yeah, we are, like I mentioned, we are in the heart of Kendall, and we, I think, are lucky to have an expansive network of physicians, scientists, and engineers throughout the Boston, Cambridge area. All right, so I want to touch on a little bit on full-time opportunities for spring 2021 grads. Right now, our early career researcher general positions are research associate as well as associate computational biologist. You can apply online at broadinstitute.org/careers with your CV and transcript, and we will reach out for references and assessment tools as a follow-up if that is needed. But our research associate role is primarily a wet lab role. We are looking for students that are really enthusiastic about the science that is taking place at the Broad and specific labs here. And our associate computational biologist position is for those who are invested in computational biology, who are interested in making their impact, in a dry lab setting, have fluency in a coding language, etc. All right. So with that, let's kind of jump into our resume and CV review. So for resumes and CVs, I think there's a big debate about, resume or CV. It doesn't matter, I think, to me as a recruiter, as long as it lists these points. So education, please list your school, your degree. If you've got a bachelor's in biochemistry, molecular biology, please be sure to list that out. Put your major. So as well as your GPA, if it is 3.5 and above, I think definitely, you've worked very hard for that GPA, and you can put it on your resume if you would like to. Please specify your research and work experience. And research and work experience is any independent lab work or work experience that you feel is relevant to this role. Specify time commitments for each position. Don't just say 2019 for a position you held from, like, say, January 2019 to February 2020. Make sure that you list out months and years. We do want to see that. And it helps us get a better understanding of how much research experience you have, because you don't want to be shortchanged, right? If you say you are working at a lab all year, but you only write the year down, we have no idea what that means. It could be a summer internship, and you don't want that, the length of your work experience to be misconstrued. So I would definitely put that on there. Describe skills learned within each role. Yes?
I was wondering, for specifying the time commitment, is it good practice to put down the number of hours? If it's a part-time position, maybe it's 10 hours a week, which is really different than a full-time position, which is like 40 hours a week.
I think Amma, did you want to go? I think you're muted. Amma, I think you're muted.
Yes, can we wait till, sorry, Yim is done with her.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry guys, this is being recorded. So, all right. Okay, so we will kind of move on. So describing skills learned within each position. What I see a lot of the time with resumes is people listing, say, they did X, Y, and Z, but they don't specify, what skills they learned. Did you learn PCR? Did you learn Western blotting? Don't say that you worked in a research lab under this PI and leave it at that. Make sure you're specifying the skills that you learned in that lab. And that you can talk about how you are using those skills. If you are using PCR, what were you using PCR to do? If you learned Western blotting, what were you using? In what context were you using Western blotting? And use bullet points for each position. Sometimes you see paragraphs for, research and work experience descriptions. I would definitely move towards using bullet points and away from paragraphs. I think visually it's just a little bit more appealing to the eye, and it helps us grab large amounts of information right away. And it's one way to make your resume stand out. Okay, and then publications. Publications, if you have a publication, make sure it's right under the work experience, because if you do have a publication, that is something that we definitely want to know and want to prioritize in your resume or CV. If you don't, it's totally fine. I think I typically advise against putting posters and presentations on resumes, because some students have done so many presentations that it extends the length of their resume to like 5 or 6 pages. That's not necessary. I think we are looking for something that's more around 2 to 2.5, especially, if you have a lot of work experience, publications, your education, these are the 3 things that you want to prioritize when you are working with a 2.5 page limit. All right, so let's move on. Excuse me. And then don'ts. So don't just do these things on your resume. Please don't list skills that you're not proficient in. If you observed someone, performing a skill, that's not necessary. We don't need to know that on your resume, because what we're interested in is the research and work experience that you have. Don't use filler information that's not applicable to the position. I see this a lot. Okay. So we get a lot of people saying that their personal skills are X, Y, and Z. And you know what? If it's a line or maybe 2 in a resume, that's not too bad. But sometimes we do get, a page and a half of, volunteer experience, what, their hobbies, their after school curriculars. Again, I think that is filler information. And I would, as I recommended before, stay within a 2.5 page limit. Don't list basic computer skills. We see a lot of Microsoft Word, Microsoft Suite, Microsoft Slides, what have you, PowerPoint, excuse me, Google Slides, and things like that, Google Suite, Outlook. Those things are not necessary to list on our resume. We all know that you guys know how to use computers. We all know that you know how to type, and that you've probably sent an email before. And, I think in the same kind of vein as this, there's no need to list very basic scientific skills. Like we see a lot of candidates that say pipetting is one of their most proficient techniques, which is it's a great technique to have. But, I would definitely encourage you guys to list, say, techniques that are a little bit more involved than that maybe, things like I mentioned, like RNA sequencing, Western blotting, PCR, immunohistochemistry, more, skills, scientific skills that are a little bit above basic. Feel free to list those on your resume and avoid listing very basic scientific skills on your resume. Okay, don't include high school information if you're looking for full-time work, as you are graduating. There's, I'm sure a lot of you did excellently in high school and got amazing GPAs, but it isn't as relevant to, um, you know, your resume now if you are looking for work as a post-grad. Unnecessary graphics and pictures. We don't need a headshot on resumes, and actually we advise against headshots for a lot of reasons. Um, you know, we want to make sure that we have a recruiting process that introduces as little bias as possible during the review process. And obviously we can't account for everything, but not having your picture on there, I think is a good way to prevent a bias from happening down the line. And what you look like, we will get to know that in the future if you move forward with us in an interview project. And so it's not really necessary on your resume. And this is probably the most important. Don't constrain yourself to a one-page resume. We see a lot of candidates do this. Feel free to brag. If feel free to list the research that you have, your lab skills, talk about that in more detail. Like I mentioned, we really do recommend like a 2.5 page limit. I think anything, if you're under that and you feel like that's okay, that really is the extent of your work experience, that's totally fine by us. But again, I don't want you guys to leave things out because you're trying to stay to a one-page limit. Okay. All right. So I would like to move into interview prep. Interview prep is really important because I know we are, the world has changed and pretty quickly. And for us here, for early career researchers this year, we have made a promise that we will be conducting all interviews and events for this year virtually for this year's cycle. And our cycle does close this spring, going into the summer. So, I think what's most critical in interviews is that you are able to discuss what you've worked on and why it's important to the project that you are a part of. Can you talk about your work critically? Can you talk about, well, why, your work was important to the larger project at hand? Can you talk not just at an individual level, but at a larger macro level about what the project is, what its goals were, and what the project was able to succeed at, et cetera? I think that's the most important. We're looking for candidates who are able to speak more in depth about their projects and their work contributions than, I sat at the bench for X amount of hours. I did this, I did this, I did this. We want to know that you have an understanding of why that was critical to the project. Please research the company and lab. Be aware of past and present projects in the organizations. This is a big one. Broad, I understand, is kind of a unique organization. We're not totally academia. We're not your traditional, say, research organization. So be aware of what we're up to. We keep our main page very up to date. We have information that we send out to candidates about individual labs if they do, proceed in the interview process. So that's very important because we are such a large organization. We have 1 million projects happening all at once. We have so many different labs and PIs, and they have different priorities. So being aware of that is very important, and being enthusiastic about what they're working on, is important. You don't want to show up to an interview with the cancer program, but you're really, really excited about what's happening in infectious disease. Make sure you're aware of, what the team that you're interviewing with is doing. Okay, be able to explain why you want the role. Why do you want to work at Broad? Why this lab? I think we're looking for mission-driven, motivated people. As I mentioned, we are a nonprofit organization. I think being mission-driven is one of our, core, qualities. And this is something that's important to us, that you are able to articulate why this role is for you. If you say, I just want to do research, I want to get a little bit of research in before I go to grad school or MD, PhD, I just graduated college, I'm looking for work, I need a job. We're going to need a little more than that. We need to hear about why this role is so appealing to you and what you can get out of this role. Okay, come prepared with relevant questions. Ask about the team, ask about what their setup is like during COVID, ask specific questions about a project that they're working on or partnerships that they've had in the past. Those are relevant questions. And I think, again, you will have questions that come up as you research Broad and the lab. So, just be aware of that. Proofread your resume and be able to talk about anything on your resume. And we do really mean anything. If you put it there, it is there for the interview team to see. And we just want to be able to know, like, hey, you have a gap from 2018 to 2019. Maybe you went to study abroad, but it's not part of your resume. Be able to talk about that. I think a lot of our hiring managers are cognizant of the fact that there are a lot of students just receiving less time in the lab and less training and what have you because of COVID. So that's something that we're working to be cognizant of. But again, be able to talk about anything on your resume. If you first were studying cancer immunology, but then you pivoted to do, genomics, why is that? Tell us why that is. What changed? Why did your interest shift? Give a heads up to your references. We do pull references along with the recruiter phone screen, but just give them a heads up and let them know that you aren't interviewing for a position, and that they, that a team may follow up with them after your interview. All right, the day of your interview. Please arrive to your interview 15 minutes before your scheduled interview if it is on site. You can prep, to be there 5 to 10 minutes before your Zoom call. Dress professionally for both video and on-site interviews. When we have on-site interviews again, if ever. And then be in a quiet space for all phone and video interviews. I know things are hard right now and not everybody has their own space that they can go to for interviews. But, again, we're working to be accommodating. And if you can find a quiet space, somewhere enclosed or, away from maybe the rest of your family that's also, home working with you during COVID, that's fine. Give us the heads up, say, hey, sorry, I'm home, we have this space to work off of right now, and there's going to be some background noise. Again, just give us that heads up and let us know. Ask relevant questions. Ask about the team. How many RAs do they have? What is the typical RA1 or ACB1 training process look like? Make sure you come prepared with questions for the team, and don't try to think of questions during the interview. I have had a couple of candidates say that to me. We can tell when you are trying to think of something on the fly. So make sure you come prepared. Be yourself. We want to get to know you. That's why we're having the interview. There's no need to pretend to be interested in something that you're not, or pretend like X, Y, and Z is relevant to you when it's not. Be yourself and let us know. We want to know, maybe that you are super interested in what the genetic perturbation platform is doing, but you have no experience working in a similar work environment. Ask questions about that. That's okay. Be able to clearly understand expectations of job responsibilities. Make sure you read the job description. We have individual job descriptions for every lab here. Make sure you read each job description, because every team is looking for something different. And again, all of what I'm talking about isn't just applicable to the Broad, it's applicable, to any organization that you're interested in. You should always review the job description and make sure that what they're looking for is in line with what you're looking for. All right. At the day of the interview, make sure you send out a thank you note via email to the interview team. I will admit, my first serious interview ever. I didn't. And I didn't get the job. I didn't know that you were supposed to send out a thank you note. So I promise it is always worthwhile to close the loop and make sure that they are aware that you are still interested in the position. So here we have some thank you note recommendations, expressing gratitude for the invitation to interview, highlighting what you learned with the team, asking about relevant time and next steps. Be sure to include your contact information with the most up-to-date contact information if it's different than what you put in your application, and connect with references and let them know that you may be following up, that there may be follow-ups after your interview. All right, well, that was it. Thank you so much, everybody.